Good afternoon. I'm Counselor D. Knudsen, and I would like to call our weekly informational meeting together for April 21st, 2008. And the first item of business today is going to be, we're going to move to the staff report because we have some guests. We're very happy to have some county commissioners here with us, Commissioner Colby, Commissioner Hayek, Commissioner Tweet, and thank you for being with us today as guests, as well as our guests from Colorado who will present some results and highlights for us. So at this time, I would like to start with our National Citizen Survey results and highlights. And Mayor, is there something you want to say about that?
Yeah, I'd just like to introduce our guests, and I just really want to say that we're very thankful of all the council and all the people that were involved to make this really a partnership effort we get a good survey of Sioux Falls where it's at, and I think we're going to find it very beneficial of what we have. And we have Erin Caldwell, who will present to us today, and she's a senior research associate with the National Research Center, and she has over 10 years of experience in this field, and she's done extensive work with cities to gather this kind of data. So we're pleased to welcome you here, Erin, and we really look forward to your report. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And I feel I should also give credit to my coworkers, Heather Locke and Demema Mann, who did much of the work in preparing this survey and the report. And also, I know they worked closely with Deborah and with Jean in putting this together. So, what Sioux Falls participated in is called the National Citizen Survey. And this is an initiative that's a partnership between our organization, National Research Center, and ICMA, or the International City and County Management Association. And so what this is, we call it a turnkey omnibus citizen survey service. And that just means by turnkey, it's templatized. The city could choose from a menu of items about what things they wanted to ask about. And the reporting is somewhat templatized too. That allows you for a very reasonable expense to get a lot of information about your citizens. It also includes what we call benchmark comparisons. There's been over 160 different jurisdictions who have participated in the National Citizen Survey in over 40 states. And we also have a full database of citizen survey results from other communities that have done more custom work. And we can provide comparisons to the results from all of those different sources. I should say there are 3,000 counties and 19,000 municipalities in the U.S. Several hundred of them do a citizen survey. And so what my boss always likes to say is you're part of an elite group that does a citizen survey and takes that time to hear from your residents. Some of the primary purposes of the survey are to assess resident satisfaction with community and the amenities here, to help evaluate Sioux Falls government. And again, we have these comparisons. We can help you to see how your residents rate certain services or community amenities compared to how residents in other jurisdictions rate those. We can determine participation rates in local activities, but what I think the survey is best at is telling you what residents think, not necessarily why they think that. So if there's certain things you're wondering, why did we get this rating, you may have to dig a little deeper, to find out why it is that residents gave a certain rating. We think it's very important, and we commend you for surveying your residents and finding out what they think. The CEOs of any well-managed company do try to hear from their customers often, and your residents are your customers. They're the ones who receive your services. And in the absence of asking, you don't know how they feel about what you're doing, and that may be operating to support or undermine what you're doing. So the results can be used to monitor trends in resident opinion, to measure government performance, to help inform budget, land use, and strategic planning decisions, and again, to benchmark your service ratings. So for this particular study, it was a mailed survey, and we selected approximately 3,000 residents, or households, I should say, at random. And we actually did that in such a way that we had 600 from each of the 5 districts. Of those 3,000 surveys, we received back 1,011 completed surveys for a 36% response rate, which is a good response rate. We find that response rates tend to range between about 25 to 40%. And the margin of error, you might have heard this term, especially around this season with a lot of political polling. It's a measure of the sampling error, or how precise your results are. And it's really only based on the number of completed surveys that we got. That's plus or minus 3 percentage points. If I am giving you a rating that's on a percent, some of the ratings I'll be giving you are going to be an average rating on a 100-point scale. And for those, that margin of error is about plus or minus 2 points. Going on. I'll tell you a little bit about some characteristics of the residents who completed the survey. 20% had lived in Sioux Falls for 5 years or less, and 45% had lived here 20 or more years. 24% were 55 years or older. Only 20% had ever attended a public meeting. So this survey gave you a chance to hear from a representative sample of those who live in your community and who you may not have heard from in the past. 59% have watched a council meeting or other public meeting on cable television. So the National Citizen Survey contains many questions that are related to the life of residents in the community. Respondents rate their overall quality of life as well as a variety of the characteristics of the community. So one of our first questions is, how would you rate your overall quality of life in Sioux Falls? And about a quarter of the respondents said their quality of life was excellent, and nearly another 2/3 said that it was good, with only 15% reporting fair and 2% poor. So what we do with these ratings is we convert them to a 100-point scale, an average rating on a 100-point scale. And I know that can sometimes be a little confusing because it's 100 points, but it's not a percent. So you can kind of think of it like a thermometer, where excellent would be 100 points and poor would be 0 points. So if everybody rated the quality of life as good, that average rating on the 100-point scale would be 67. If everybody rated their quality of life as fair, that average rating would be 33. So hopefully that helps to make it clear. And I should say, feel free to interrupt me if you want, if you have questions during the presentation, and of course I'll take questions afterwards. So if we go on to the next scale, those percents I just read you for the overall quality of life, that results in an average rating of 68 on the 100-point scale. We also asked residents to rate Sioux Falls as a place to live, a place to work, and a place to raise children. All of those were average ratings of 61 or higher, and they were also what we're saying is above the norm, and that means these ratings were above the average given by residents in those other jurisdictions that I mentioned before that we can compare your ratings to. When we asked residents to rate Sioux Falls as a place to retire, the average rating was 55 on a 100-point scale, and that was similar to the norm. You had a question.
Yeah, I do. On the overall quality of life ratings, is that broken down by zip code and by age, or is it just by the entire population?
That 68 is for the entire population. There is a report where we do some breakdowns by district.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay. There were a variety of community characteristics that we asked respondents to rate. And for the most part, you can see I've got a long list on this slide here. They were above the normative comparison. People in Sioux Falls felt very positively about the community here. So educational opportunities, shopping opportunities, the overall image or reputation of Sioux Falls, and the overall quality of new development, these were at a 67 or above on that 100-point scale, so good or better. The overall appearance of Sioux Falls was a 66, recreational opportunities of 59, and the sense of community of 58. And there were a variety of other kinds of community characteristics that were also rated, and again, nearly all of these were given a rating that was above that normative comparison. There was one exception, and that was the openness and acceptance of the community towards people of diverse backgrounds. That was an average rating of 51, so about the midpoint of the scale, and that was below the normative comparison. We asked how people felt about the ease of travel by car, by bus, by bike, by walking. These ratings range from about 46 for the bus to 62 for walking, and all of those were above the normative comparison. We asked about access to child care, health care, and I should say affordable quality child care, affordable quality health care, and affordable quality housing. And these ratings range from 46 to 58 on that 100-point scale, and all of those were also above the normative comparison. Safety from crime and fire were similar to or above the norm. We asked, oh, and I should mention that my slides are in a slightly different order than what you might have if you have a hard copy. I just decided it would flow better with this. So this is one where it's actually probably slide 15 in what you have. We asked a list of, I can't remember, maybe about 10 items, how much, if at all, people thought these were a problem. And so of the ones that were most likely to be rated as a problem, drugs was rated as a major problem by 23% of respondents, traffic congestion is a major problem by 21% of respondents, and homelessness by 15% of respondents. So a large part of the survey was devoted to asking people about the quality of city services. How did they feel you were doing in providing those services to the community? And I should say that, again, nearly all of these services were rated above the normative comparison. On this slide, I have 4 of the top, the highest rated. And I don't actually like necessarily showing these this way because I always think it's most fair to have that normative comparison and not try to compare, say, fire services to streets, because streets are always going to do worse than libraries or something like that. It's just the nature of this kind of people being asked to rate those kinds of services. But fire services, city parks, emergency medical services, and the appearance of parks were the highest rated of the services. And those were above the norm, except the EMS services was similar to the normative comparison. And I should say that all of the public safety services that we also asked about, police services and so on, they were above the normative comparison. All the, what we call the leisure services, that would be library, recreation, and parks, all of those services were rated above the normative comparison. And people were pretty active in using the parks and recreation facilities. 92% reported visiting a park at least once in the last year. 87% had visited a city parks and recreation community center. And 49% had participated in a parks and recreation program or activity. And when I say the respondent, I should say the respondent's household. The question was actually phrased, have you or any member of your household? So some of these may be reporting about their children having participated in these programs. So then, moving on to the lowest rated services. Services to low-income people got an average rating of 46 on the 100-point scale. However, that was above the normative comparison. We asked about several services to several other special populations like seniors and youth. Services to seniors was rated above the normative comparison. Services to youth was rated similar to what people in other jurisdictions have rated. Health services and public information services were also rated above the normative comparison. Among the street and transportation services, and we have several of those on this slide, street repair and street cleaning were given lower ratings, and they were below the normative comparison. And as I understand, this was actually a tough year for the streets in Sioux Falls, and that might account for these lower ratings. One of the examples I give is, this made the news, so you may have heard about some of the blizzards we had in Metro Denver, where I'm from, last year. I think it shut down the airport near Christmas time, and then we had a blizzard every weekend for 6 weeks in a row. And so for the surveys we did of jurisdictions along what we call the Front Range in Metro Denver, along the mountains there on the plains of Colorado, everybody got bad ratings on snow removal in the 2006-2007 year. So and those have started coming back up, and that might be what's going on for Sioux Falls, something to maybe take a look at. Street lighting and sidewalk maintenance were rated above the normative comparison. Snow removal, traffic signal timing, and the amount of public parking were given ratings similar to the normative comparison. And bus services were given a rating that was above the normative comparison, although only 14% of respondents reported that they or anyone in their household had used a bus in the last year. Overall, we asked the question, how do you rate the quality of services overall provided by the Sioux Falls City government? And that was given a rating above the normative comparison. And of the 37 services that were rated, 26 were above the normative comparison, 7 were similar, and only 4 were below. We also asked some what we are calling public trust questions. So we asked people whether they were pleased with the overall direction that Sioux Falls is taking. That was given an average rating of 68 on the 100-point scale. That was above the national comparison. We asked whether people thought they were getting good value for the taxes they pay. That was given an average rating of 64, also above the normative comparison. Whether the Sioux Falls city government welcomes citizen involvement or city government listens to citizens, those were given ratings of 54 and 63 on the 100-point scale, and those ratings were similar to those seen in other jurisdictions. This next slide shows, and I have to apologize for the dots that are on the map, and you can actually kind of see we buy a mailing list for this that's based on the what's called the United States Postal Service Delivery Sequence File, and that allows us to get all of the households within Sioux Falls, and we actually purchased that list to cover an area bigger than Sioux Falls, so we can be sure we get all of the cities. So you can see that the people we had geocode these or tell us whether they were in or out of the boundaries. The red dots are addresses that are outside, and the blue dots are inside. But the dots aren't really what's important. What I just wanted to show was these districts, that District 5 is sort of in the central part of Sioux Falls, District 2 in the southeast, 4 in the northeast, 3 in the northwest, and District 1 in the southwest. And that's because on this next slide, we did, I think I had mentioned, we did look at ratings by these different districts. And in general, we found that service and quality of life ratings were highest among residents of District 2 and lowest among residents of District 5. Although a lot of times these differences weren't real large, but they were there. One sort of exception to this was that residents of District 5 in the interior did rate transit services higher, and they also were more likely to ride the bus, while District 2 had lower bus ridership and actually lower ratings of bus service. So Sioux Falls had the opportunity to put several what we call policy questions. They don't necessarily have to be about policy. They're just a chance for Sioux Falls to put on some questions that are unique for your community or your government. So Sioux Falls asked people to please rate the city's efforts in addressing promoting redevelopment and addressing blighted areas. So 61% felt that the city government was doing an excellent or good job in promoting redevelopment, and 56% thought they were doing an excellent or good job in addressing blighted areas. And since we've been talking so much about this average rating on the 100-point scale, I just thought I'd say that for promoting redevelopment, that would be, I think, about a 54 on the 100-point scale, and for blighted areas, about a 52. So. Then Sioux Falls also asked respondents to please rate how well the city is managing growth, and 62% felt the city was doing an excellent or good job, 10% excellent, 52% good, and that was an average rating of about 55 on a 100-point scale. The last policy question, I'm just going to go ahead and read this. So, the city is considering a proposal to build a new coliseum that will be an event center for football, concerts, and other events, and replace the Howard Wood Stadium at that site. The proposal assumes that a donor would fund up to 50% of the cost for the project, and the city would fund the remainder. To what extent do you support or oppose this proposal? And about 2/3 supported the proposal, 1/3 opposed it. It should be noted, though, that 31% strongly supported, 37% somewhat supported, and on the opposition, there was actually 18% who strongly opposed, and then 15% who somewhat opposed. So if people opposed it, they tended to strongly oppose. Sioux Falls also had the opportunity to ask what we call an open-ended question. That means that it was a question people could respond to in their own words. And we asked, what is the primary reason you live in Sioux Falls? And we sort of categorized some of these responses, although, as you'll see, we've pulled out a few sort of representative comments here. People tended to say things that crossed a lot of different categories. Job opportunities was mentioned by about 28% of those who answered this question. People would say things like, it's a very excellent working community and a place to raise my family and live. Or, I was offered a job opportunity that was too good to pass up. Another reason people gave for living in this community was their family and their friends here. Somebody said, it's close to family, and Sioux Falls has been my home for over 40 years. I like it here. Another said, I grew up here, and Sioux Falls is a great place to raise my kids. The people here are friendly. And about 23% of people said a comment that kind of fell into this category. And about 16% said, well, I was born here, it's my home. One said, I'm a lifelong resident. There's no better city in the USA. It's not too big, yet it offers big city advantages. Another said, "This has been our home since 1947. We have traveled extensively and haven't found any place we would rather live." People also would mention the quality of life, that there were lots of opportunities in the city for shopping, recreation, or education, that it's a safe, clean place, or about the hospitals that are here, the cost of living, or that it's a good place to retire. So, in conclusion, some of, I would say, the strengths of Sioux Falls are the quality of life, access and mobility, and economic development. And this was one service I didn't highlight before, but actually it was in the 93rd percentile, meaning you were right at the top of the jurisdictions that were rated. Some of the challenges, I've mentioned some of these, are street repair, street cleaning, storm drainage, and recycling. These were those 4 services I mentioned that were below the normative comparison. So that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Erin, thank you so much. Commissioner Colby?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. When you compared with governments, this was other municipal governments?
It was municipalities and counties, although the majority of the governments are municipalities.
Okay. I mean, it wasn't comparing Sioux Falls municipal government with Minnehaha County government?
No, it was actually to our whole database of survey results.
You
which-
just didn't want to have a disadvantage for the city.
Right.
When was the survey completed?
Oh, that's a good question. I will look that up. I want to say it was in the early spring, but let me take a quick look. You know, it's not in the report. I might have to get back to you on the exact dates.
It
unless
sounds like the
Deborah
end of
can
March
remember.
is what Deborah and Vernon are indicating, so the end of March.
End of March, okay.
So, Counselor Costello?
2 weeks ago?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, just about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago?
No, I think it takes us a little time to tabulate the results, so it must have been
Yeah.
more like at the end of February, beginning of March.
First of March or end of March?
I believe it was the end of March when we had the draft. We had looked at a draft around Easter. I think that was over Easter weekend.
Okay, so the
And then it was
surveys
sent
would
it
have been
back.
then, and I'm sorry, I can get back to you with that information. I'm sorry I don't have it right here. The surveys probably then were mailed a little earlier than that. So people were completing the surveys more like at the beginning of March.
I believe they went out in the mail in mid-January.
Mid-January, okay.
Completed end of February. We had the draft, I think, by March, if I remember.
Okay.
Mid-March.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I should have that information. I don't
Counselor
remember
Costello?
that.
In one of the first slides, you said that I think any given average rating, there's a margin of error of plus or minus 2%.
Right.
And I'm curious how the media influence around the time of the survey could impact the survey. In other words, if we were dealing with an issue, I'll pick it out, streets, that was a hot topic during that time frame, and it may have been a negative issue, how likely is that to have influenced the survey?
I would say it's very likely. That margin of error means, had we been able to ask everybody in Sioux Falls at that time how they would have rated streets, we would have been within plus or minus 2 points. However, if the media was very active at that point and people were hearing some things about streets, everybody's opinion would have been lower. So this is more measuring that precision of results had we been able to talk to everybody instead of just a sample of people within the city.
Thank you.
Counselor Brown?
Actually, a question for Jean. Maybe if you could share, especially with the county, too, how we use these results going forward in terms of performance measurement and what kind of a tool these numbers will be used for.
Gene Roanhorse, Director of Finance for the City of Sioux Falls. The outcome of the survey will be used to, as much as we can this year, we're kind of halfway into our budget process. I don't know where the county is in their budget process right now, but we will use it to better allocate resources to the areas that we think we need some help in. Obviously, streets is one of the big ones. I think, Councilor Costello, it probably was skewed a little bit at that time of the year. Nobody was happy about anything at that point. but we'll use it to direct resources where we can improve the score. We'll also be using it to make sure that the ones where we did score high in, fire, parks in particular, that we make sure that we continue to carry that level of service, that the citizens are happy. I think the unique thing to look at here is people do seem to feel that they're getting their money's worth for the taxes that they're paying. And there's other sources, literature in that people, it's not that they don't like to pay taxes, but they want to know what they're getting for it, and they want value for it. And apparently from the one item that Aaron pointed out, people do feel they're getting value for their dollars. So we want to, that's something we want to continue to maintain, that people feel that if I give you a dollar in tax, I'm going to get a dollar's worth of value out of it.
Thank you, Gene. Commissioner Hayek.
Well, and maybe Gene's the one that answered this, I don't know. When was the last time this type of study was done, if ever? I mean, is this the first time? And if it was, do you plan to do another study in like 5 years? Or certainly since James.
Well, Mr. Jameson has been around here long enough, so longer than anyone else is. He may be able to answer historically. I am not aware of anything like this being done in the past.
No, it has not been, and I think one of the reasons for doing it was to get a benchmark to go from here forward. Was the primary emphasis in starting.
That's kind of what I thought, so I was curious because I think it's excellent.
This is kind of what we've been characterizing it as a stake in the ground. We know where we're at today. We're thinking that approximately a year and a half from now, we will do another survey and see if we've moved the needle on any of these items. It's not the kind of thing you do every year. We're working with performance management, and the performance management stuff that we're working on with our various departments ties right into this survey. Indeed, some of the questions that are asked in the performance survey part of the process that we're going through, like I say, you take answers right out of the survey that goes into the performance measurement survey. So a year and a half sounds like a good time frame. I wouldn't guarantee that, but then probably every other year. I think trying to do it every year isn't going to tell you that much. But every 2 years to see if you're moving the needle, that probably makes some sense, but that's certainly not carved in stone.
And then just a quick follow-up, if there's anything that, of course, Minnehaha County can use, we would hope that you would forward it to us and as something that would be, beneficial to the citizens of the county as well as the city.
That is if they pay for it.
No free lunch, huh?
I don't know if there's a way to meld the two together, but we certainly could have a conversation with Heather and Aaron about that and see if there is. But certainly the county is welcome to any, and you should all have a hard copy now.
Thank you very much.
To take with you, and if everything worked right, about 30 minutes ago, it should have come up on the internet, so it's out there. This presentation is on Granicus, so it can be played back. We are going to be gathering or putting out some DVD, I guess it's DVDs, not CDs, DVDs of this presentation. So we'll be able to get it out that way. Tomorrow morning, we're at 9 o'clock, if anyone's interested. Aaron will be giving this presentation again, primarily for employees of the city, but that's not exclusive by any means. If the county, if you have somebody that you want to show up and you think would make sense for them to come and see it as employees of the city, McFarland would probably be a good idea. Unfortunately, I don't think we've contacted him, but certainly they should come to that. So we're taking this very seriously. We want to drive it down into the city as far as we can, so that that person that is opening the water hydrants and flushing the drains, flushing things right now, understands why it's important, what they're doing, and that they ought to do a good job for it. But the trick is to drive that down into the organization so that everybody knows what they're doing and what value they're adding back for the taxpayers.
Councilor Brown, and then I'll switch over here for some questions.
Comment and then a question for Commissioner Hayek. The Chamber does a survey too, not to the degree of this, and they don't do it, I don't know how often, but it's not real often, but there are some results there, but nothing with the depth of this. And then a question for Eugene. we also did unscientific survey on our website. I'm wondering if those, what kind of response we got to the website survey in terms of numbers, and then have we done comparisons to see if the unscientific results mirror the scientific ones?
We got about 300 hits on the internet on that. They are compiled. We have not tried to compare them back to this at this point. It's something we should do. It's not statistical. We can't make a statistical statement just because it wasn't run as a statistical sample. But it's interesting it's interesting information. I really encourage you to look at it. For instance, one of the books that you've got, there's 5. You should have 5 booklets there. One of them is just comments that people made. There's like 1,500 comments out there, something like that people made of the city in that. Very interesting reading. And again, it's something that should make you feel good about the city. There's a lot of emotion that tends to fly around here in the county and the city and the mayor and all that kind of stuff. And when you look at it and look at this survey, I think the government, the elected officials, should feel very, very good about what you've done. You seem to, at least from this survey, the perception seems to be that things are going very well. But we'll try and do something with that, with the stuff we got off the internet. If nothing else, we'll get you just the raw data, what that said also.
Councilor Stagers?
Yes, I was just wondering, in regard to the different districts, do we have any numbers on how many responded from like District 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
I'm not sure if those are in the report, but we could definitely get that information back to you.
The reason I'm asking is because I can conceive here that there's going to be some districts where you might not get as many replies as other districts where you're going to get a lot of replies, and whether that is maybe skewing the results or maybe it's not.
Deborah, do you want to comment on that too?
I was just going to say, if I could, because I got to work on this project closely with Jean. If you look at your report for geographic subgroup comparisons, which is one of the smaller books, if that's a good thing, I don't know. But you'll see the number of respondents on page 3 broken out by district with a percentile. And then further on, you can see some comparisons across the board, but also honing in on your particular district, which I think is really important for each council member, especially for those who are represented by the district and not at large.
And I'll just mention that those response rates range from 18% to 26% in any particular district.
Councilor Stagers, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering here, there's one district that really stands out quite a bit as responding more than some of the other districts, and I was just wondering if that's possibly skewing the results for that?
It is not. For the overall results, we weight the data so that the districts are represented in the proportion of households that are actually in that district.
Okay.
Councilor Jameson?
Just a question, because I'm always interested in where we got rated low. What were some of the other cities that have had ratings? Were these some of the same items, or are they entirely different?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. You're asking,
The lowest ratings were street repair, traffic signal timing, amount of parking, and services, low income. Are those similar to other cities, I guess?
I would say that almost always street services are at the bottom of that list. Also, sometimes those services to special populations. And that's why I think it's important to also be looking at that normative comparison. And in the case of Sioux Falls, 2 of those street services were actually, they were low absolutely on that 100-point scale, but they were also low compared to the normative comparison. But I wouldn't say they were probably 50 points lower. They're probably more like 5 to 10 points lower. I mean, those are just services that tend to be rated lower compared to things like libraries and parks.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Would there be any other questions or comments by any of the councilors or the guests who are with us today? Okay, yes, okay. Commissioner Tweed.
I'm Carol Tweed, and I'm the chair of the County Commission this year, so I guess I would just like to say thank you to the mayor and to the council for inviting us today. We did not have any business for our joint meeting, but it was very nice of you to invite us here for this information. Thank you.
And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us. We are pleased to always have you with us. And Aaron, thank you very much, and welcome again to our city. And again, we, on behalf of the entire council, I'm sure we would also like to thank the staff that has worked very hard on this for some time, and we are very pleased with the results, and we wish you well tomorrow with your presentations.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
Mayor, is there anything else you want to say on this topic before we move on?
I think, everybody got a view of it, and I'll go back and read it. It'll be all right.
Okay, some
Lot
bedtime
of reading,
tonight.
a lot of reading to cover there.
Okay.
But thank everybody.
Okay. All right, with that, Gene, did you have anything else for us?
You get 1 week off, but then the following week, there will be a test.
All right. We will, right after our meeting tonight, we will be studying this right before we go to sleep. Okay, thank you again, Commissioners, for being with us, and we're going to move on to our regular informational items, okay? Thank you for coming. Okay, just going on with our, with our regular agenda items. Sorry, Carol. Thank you again for coming. We would like to go ahead and have our weekly staff report by Deborah Owen, our city clerk.
Thank you and good afternoon. Just a couple of things to remind you of. Of course, we have the new council members-elect will be sworn in. Pardon me. And that will be on May 19th at 11 a.m. The mayor will be presiding, and then we're also just securing the judges who will be there for those particular council members, and we're looking forward to that day. In addition, just to let you know, on May 12th, we've had in the past, but we'll continue to have what we call kind of an outgoing and incoming dinner. We run it between the 4 o'clock and the 7 o'clock meetings Monday night, and it will be a time to honor those who are outgoing and then to hear from someone, a speaker about the city, and then also to welcome those who will be new city council members for this next 4-year term. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Deborah. Mayor, do you have anything else for us under Mayor?
Gary, you want to just talk about item 28 or 38 tonight? We'd just like to give a briefing on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council. This item 38 that's scheduled for a first reading tonight is the ordinance that amends the ordinance by defining a full-service restaurant and establishing additional standards for conditional use standards for on-sale alcohol. This was discussed at the, I believe it was the Land Use Committee meeting on March 31st, and I was not able to be at that meeting, but I did participate in the drafting of the ordinance, and I asked the mayor for a couple minutes just to share with you my understanding, my thoughts as to why the ordinance was drafted as it was in the first instance. It was not and is not, at least from staff, intended to be an ordinance that regulates video lottery. It is instead intended to do what the title says. That does not mean that video lottery was not mentioned in the original draft, and in fact it was, but I'll tell you what our thoughts were at the time of drafting. We were concerned about the city as it continues to grow. We know that the city adds over a square mile of land to its boundaries every year, and with that square mile comes additional residential, commercial, business. And the premises that we started out from the drafting of the ordinance was that a concentration of restaurants is not a negative for the city. So if you had a shopping mall, a lifestyle center as they were called, that had 2 or 3 restaurants in it, whether they served liquor or whether even they may or may not have video lottery in some form in their back room, that's not a negative to growth in the city because restaurants are generally a good thing for the city. Concentration of bars, liquor establishments, on the other hand, is generally not a good thing from a land use standpoint. So if you had a shopping center that had 3 bars, whose primary focus of business was selling liquor, that's generally not a good thing, yet it's hard to place a sort of a limitation on, a footage limitation on where bars should be and shouldn't be. In other words, we couldn't, when we started looking at whether you could just put a 2,000-foot limitation on bars, we ran into all sorts of questions that came up in that regard. But one thing we know is that what tends to concentrate liquor establishments in Sioux Falls is video lottery. We know that. I think maybe to a certain extent they're competing for the same customers. So we thought that if we included a 2,000-foot limitation for bars, in other words, those liquor establishments that are not full-service restaurants, that would have a tendency to disperse bars throughout the city, so you wouldn't have two or three primarily establishments that serve primarily alcohol in a small location like a strip mall or a neighborhood. For that reason, we did not in the original draft include the 2,000-foot limitation for full-service restaurants. Again, we could not make the quantitative argument that a concentration of restaurants is a detriment from a land use standpoint. And furthermore, we know that a large number of restaurants in the city now and probably in the future will not choose to have video lottery. So that's a smaller issue with restaurants certainly than it would be with bars, the concentration of their uses. This is the first reading tonight, and we are not coming to you as an administration with any proposed amendments to it, but I will ask you at the time of the second reading to consider removing the 2,000-foot restriction that was added for restaurants, because that flies in the face of the rationale, the methodology that we used when we drafted this ordinance strictly as a land use ordinance. That's all that I have, but I would answer.
Would there be any questions for the city attorney on this proposal? Councilor Kavanaugh?
Gary, I understand your logic and rationale, but what would you say if the argument were to be made that we appear to be favoring full-service restaurants over alcohol establishments by not placing the same 2,000-foot distance requirement on them with regard to casinos? The argument would be a casino is a casino is a casino, and I'm just curious if you would comment on that.
Yes, I think my response would be the rationale that we used before, that there is no negative that we can see to concentrating restaurants, full-service restaurants, if indeed that's what they are within the city, and certainly as we grow. There are negatives to concentrating bars, and we're focusing on the item for bars that does tend to concentrate them in our city, and we know this from our own experience.
If one of the issues that, in my experience, we thought we had a solution to overconcentration or our ability to place reasonable controls on video lottery establishments back in 2001. Since that time, as we all have learned, a loophole was carved out. And my question to you would be, do you see full-service restaurants utilizing a loophole, as it were, to add more video lottery establishments? Because if we don't keep that in that first section, that's what we would have.
That's a very fair question, and thank you for that. I think this is something you'll probably hear more about at the time of either tonight at first reading or second reading. All I can tell you is the planning staff worked on this, spent a good deal of time trying to come up with something they felt would work, and they believe that the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council will be able to draw the distinction between what is in fact a full-service restaurant and those uses that might try to circumvent the definition as in the ordinance. A full-service restaurant primarily is in business to serve food. Any alcohol or any other use is ancillary to the service of food. When you look at floor plans and ask questions of businesses as they come forward, if it does not appear that it is in fact a full-service restaurant in business for the service of food but is trying to circumvent rules, I think that's when the Planning Commission and the Council would say no.
Councilor Panica?
Just to follow up on Kevin's question and where he's going, I think, isn't there a logic then to why the percentage was 60/40, or why it couldn't be even a higher percentage to regulate, frankly, what you're just trying to indicate?
You're talking about the 60/40 that was in the state?
For revenue sales, yes.
Yeah. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. Planning staff put a great deal of effort into this, and this was the definition they came up with and felt comfortable with, and they believe that they can enforce it. I'm not saying that as we go forward, issues won't arise and there won't be further amendments or fine-tuning of the ordinance necessary, but I think my opinion as city attorney is it's a good place to start. And again, we're not focused on video lottery. We are focused on where we want liquor establishments in this city.
So it's really not a silver bullet on a percentage. It was just, if you will, a mirror of what the state was using.
I don't think we included the percentage in our definition in the ordinance.
Right.
The definition that's in the ordinance was meant to give maximum control and flexibility to the Planning Commission and to the elected city council.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Jameson?
The question is really going to be what happens when a full-service restaurant opens. And because of the change in that restaurant, it suddenly loses its restaurant and becomes a 50-50 deal, another 60-40. Now what do we do? How are we going to go back? Is our ordinance going to be tight enough to enforce that 60-40 or whatever the state says we got to have?
Actually, I want to point out that this ordinance has nothing to do with the state legislation. This is the City of Sioux Falls' attempt to regulate liquor placement. A condition in the conditional use permit will be that the liquor license is granted solely for the purpose of a full-service restaurant. If it loses its standing as a full-service restaurant, it may well lose its liquor license, and that is the enforcement aspect of this. And when it loses its liquor license, it loses any right it has to have video lottery.
Well, my point is the state going to make that determination?
Are you talking about the 60-40?
Yes.
I think that's unresolved under the new legislation that passed. It's one of the things that's being worked on now.
Councilor Costello?
You know, I think what we really has got a confusion over what the new licenses will have with the 60-40 and where we are today with existing licenses. But, you know, we're putting local mom and pop operators in an untenable situation to invest millions of dollars into a facility only to have the potential to have their license pulled away because they don't meet the conditional use. And I don't understand how we can even consider this idea. I'm still confused about what the ordinance says today and what we might amend it to. If I'm a chain restaurant, or I'm at any restaurant, and I serve alcohol and I come in, I don't have to live by a 2,000-foot rule? Is that the way it's written today?
If you are, in fact, well, there's no 2,000-foot rule for bars, restaurants, anybody, unless they have video lottery, and that was by choice, again, to disperse the liquor licenses going at what we think is the root of what constitutes bars, and that's video lottery. Spread them out. And I guess in answer to your question, Councilor Jameson, if an issue became, you know, you have the question of enforcement on the state level for the new licenses as compared to the old, but under this ordinance, if a restaurant, a full-service restaurant, chose to have video lottery, and we don't think a lot of them will, but if they chose to, but then they generally moved to the status of a bar rather than a full-service restaurant, they're going to have to give up their video lottery. I mean, it's that simple. That's the condition under which they will be allowed to have video lottery.
But if the license is issued to them, who's going to prove that they don't meet the standard?
If I might, Kerry, under the state law, the state proposed licensing, they have to, if they have a new license, not one of our existing ones, but the new ones, they have to attest every year to their alcohol percentages. And I don't know what happens if that percentage comes up on the wrong side. But they're supposed to attest and provide whatever documentation deemed necessary by the municipality to certify their use. And I don't know how that has to get worked out yet. But I'm just curious, as a comment for somebody who's been in the industry, I can tell you that the industry-wide, bars want to serve more food and restaurants want to serve more alcohol. And there is a coming together. The bar industry has found out it's good to sell food, keeps people in there. It's good for business. And the same is true with the restaurants. It's a lower margin, it's easy add-on sales, and together they're coming. And I think that we would be shocked by the number of what we consider restaurants who have video lottery as accessory of their alcohol splits, because they do a lunch business during the day and they'll do a dinner at night and they become a bar sometime in the evening. And I don't think we understand the dynamics that are at play here. The other thing that concerns me is that I'm not sure the origin of this ordinance. I mean, it seems to me it goes back to a time when we were looking at capping video lottery, capping a limit of the number of machines in. And then it kind of morphed into an issue where these video lottery establishments are chewing up all our alcohol licenses to get around the rules. Well, I mean, I think that was the bigger issue. And now, with the state allowing us to issue unlimited number of licenses, is this really a necessary ordinance? And can't we deal with the fact, like the 6th of Minnesota issue, can't we change some of our existing conditional use permits to accommodate our concern from a council standpoint on overconcentration on locations next to residential areas? Can't we make some modest change in our existing conditional use process, coupled with the fact of what we've got coming for liquor licenses that can kind of control what we're concerned about, instead of coming up with a new ordinance that is a complete can of worms?
Councilor Kavanaugh?
I'm not sure if I would agree that we have a can of worms here, proposal. I think, certainly the 2,000-foot distancing requirement that is currently in our ordinance, certainly that's always subject to change by the council. But whether or not we keep that or anything closely resembling to it, I think is an important issue. Gary touched on it, and I believe it's important to make sure we all understand. Bars tend to concentrate, and they tend to concentrate because of the video lottery placements. Now, what does that mean to us? Should we just say, so what? I think not. I think when you have those concentrations, you raise the stakes considerably for crime in that particular section of our community. And when you have increased crime, you have a deteriorating neighborhood. And I do not want to see that.
Councilor Costello?
Well, why not then use an undue concentration that we are allowed to do now, I believe, under conditional use? If the council feels that there's an undue concentration of bars, we can deny it for that purpose. And I understand that we farmed out our vote to the Planning Commission, but that's what I'm talking about. That's the minor change that I think we could use, is we could change and have alcohol licenses or all conditional use permits. We could have that discussion, but we could have those come to the council for final action. And then we can decide as a council whether or not there's an undue concentration, and we can deal with that issue without enacting an entire ordinance which will have unequivocal, will have unintended consequences. Because the other fact in the restaurant industry that happens today is that local mom and pop operators are at a huge competitive disadvantage to national chains. They don't have the purchasing power, they don't have the marketing power, they don't have the pockets to get the financing. And a lot of our local mom and pop operators need video lottery to survive to some extent. And if we want to eliminate their opportunity to open, we're become a city of national chains. And if that's what we want, so be it. But I don't think that's what we want.
Councilor Kavanaugh?
Well, to be clear on what this ordinance is proposing, there are two things that we're asking, that the administration is asking us to do. First is define what a full-service restaurant would be in anticipation of these new licenses that we would be allowed after July 1st. And the second thing is to take the current undue concentration language, or adding to the current undue concentration language in our land use ordinance, putting the 2,000-foot distancing requirement that is currently in our alcohol section of our city ordinances. We're moving it over there, so we are providing clarity. The problem I see with the undue concentration discussion, without having specific standards like the 2,000-foot is, it is so nebulous and so subject to interpretation that you never get any. You can drive anything through it. And I believe that's where the administration is going, and I would support them on that by taking that a specific example of what this council as public policy believes to be an undue concentration in one specific type of an industry.
Councilor Costello?
I would just point out that the new alcohol license provided by the state have a definition for a restaurant, a full-service restaurant, and we are enacting another definition for a full-service restaurant. When is too much regulation? When is there too much regulation? This is too much regulation.
And I would just like to, Councilor Kevin.
Well, I think that deserves some type of a response. Why didn't we just go with what the state's definition was? I know there's a reason for it.
We didn't, if I might, Mr. Chair. Again, this was the definition that is in our ordinance, was the definition that our planning department felt best gave the Planning Commission and the City Council the ability to deal with issues on a case-by-case basis. The problem with when you get into Route 6040, and I think it's going to prove to be a real problem with the state, is that how do you calculate that and what happens when you fall to 5941? Those are the questions. If you read the definition that's in Section 539 of the ordinance of full-service restaurant, I think it's pretty clear what a full-service restaurant is. What is your primary focus? And if your primary focus isn't the service of food, and if you don't have a private dining room, and if you don't, or separate dining room, and if you don't have a commercial kitchen, you're not a full-service restaurant. You may be a bar trying to get around the 2,000-foot rule so you can have video lottery. And those are the issues which will come before, if the ordinance passes, before the Planning Commission and the Council going forward. I'm sure they will. And nothing is perfect. This ordinance probably isn't perfect, but it's a place to start from if the Council chooses to adopt it.
Councilor Costello?
I'm just curious, who is advancing this ordinance? Is it the administration or is it the Council? Who is supporting it? Do you, Gary, feel that this is a necessary ordinance on behalf of the city? Does our Director of Planning, Mike Cooper, feel that this is beneficial? Are they the ones that are behind the ordinance, or is the mayor behind it? Who's behind the ordinance?
Again, I'm the city attorney, and I respond to requests. But you were right when you said this whole process developed out of what we saw was happening last November and December when our available liquor licenses were going to video lottery casinos primarily to defeat the 2,000-foot rule. We looked at a land use aspect of it, and as far as who's bringing it forward, Mike, do you want to address it?
Mike Cooper, Director of Planning and Building Services. I believe that on behalf of the administration, the Planning Commission, that the intent was to bring forward to the City Council and to the public an attempt to distinguish between bars and restaurants, and so that restaurants would have a different process for determining locations than bars. And that was really the intent of the start of this whole discussion, is that we want to come up with a new definition of a land use that would distinguish between a restaurant and a bar. And there would be two separate tracks in terms of determining appropriate locations for those land uses.
So this is a planning department ordinance that you support. You think this is a necessary ordinance for the city?
I think it would help our situation, yes, as far as dealing with these in the future. Because right now, we just have one category of land use which is on sale. It doesn't matter if it's a restaurant or a bar or a combination of the two. And I think this would help, at least based on the land use hearings that we've gone through in recent years, and we kind of know what the neighborhood concerns have been historically. So I think this would actually simplify the process for a legitimate full-service restaurant. It would simplify their ability to find locations.
Well, and I guess, Councilor Costello, I would like to say, I mean, I've not, been working behind the scenes on this proposal at all, but I mean, the staff knows from my comments over the last few years, I'm very frustrated that, we're out there working so hard to try to get more alcohol licenses for economic development, and then when some come open, that so many of them go to, frankly, just video gambling joints, which, again, I realize are legal, even though I hate them, but I think, it's just, wow, it is a difficult situation. I'm just saying that people like me are looking for improvement, and the questions that Councilor Kavanaugh asked and the comments he's made, I just agree with totally on this, and yet I'm empathetic about mom and pop restaurants competing with national chains. I understand that, but you can imagine how people like me think about the fact that they've got to make up the difference by using video lottery. I mean, I'll save you that sermon, but I mean, that's just beyond me to think that is acceptable. But I mean, that's philosophical, I know.
Well, again, with the new licenses, video lottery establishments aren't going to be chewing up our alcohol licenses because we're going to be allowed to issue an unlimited number of them in the future. I would just ask, when at second reading, some of the language has changed and evolved over time. We at one point was 2,000 foot from building to building, and now it's 2,000 foot property line to property line. If the planning department could prepare a map that would show that, the existing licenses and parks and schools, and I think it would illustrate a pretty clear picture of what the ordinance is about.
I'm sure the planning department would. And in conclusion, I will tell you, as I indicated, we are going to, I don't know whether you will adopt this ordinance or not, but I would ask you that you consider removing the language for the 2,000-foot rule for restaurants. And I think we're working on a few other very minor wording changes, which we will get to you before the second reading. But again, they're just words. The intent would be as laid out in the ordinance for you to say yes or no to.
Councilor Stagers.
Yes, I guess I'm a little concerned why we can't get all this taken care of before first reading, instead of rushing through this with first reading and saying, well, now we're going to have some changes for second reading. I mean, this is not, the only time this has happened, but, I think it would be best if we would have all this taken care of before this is even brought before us.
And Councilor Kavanaugh?
Well, that may be Councilor Stagger's preferred method, but I suspect that's part of the public review process. When it goes to the council and the public, and we're talking about it now, that's why we have first and second reading, and that's why things do get modified.
And I'm not sure, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you at the end, Kevin, is that I'm not really sure that this is rushed. I mean, honestly, I've been on council now 6 years, and some of us have been talking about this issue almost since I arrived. And I think it's difficult, to ever get a consensus in a committee on any topic, but at a certain point, you just have to, to me, bring it up, get a first reading. If we want to defer a second reading, we can do that, but it's when there's not a consensus on these very difficult topics, there's a point sometimes where you just need to, I think, vote them up or down and move on. Councilor Stagers.
Well, I guess the impression I had in the committee when we talked about this, it was a rush to get it done, and I voted against rushing doing this. And now we're in a situation where we had this being brought before us, and even before we start talking in detail about it, it's like, well, we want to make this change, we want to do this, or whatever. And once again, I think it's appropriate that, we get these ordinances in proper shape before you bring it before the city council. And then as we talk about it in the city council, there might be some minor changes to be made. But to just come forth and all of a sudden say, well, we want this change, we want this change. We haven't even talked about it on the council. Once again, it's not just this particular ordinance, but also other ordinances, too, where this happens.
Councilor Costello?
I would agree with Councilor Staggers. I mean, if we're talking about public notification and giving adequate notice to make wholesale changes to the ordinance the night of the final action, it does seem to be a little disingenuous, and maybe we should wait until we've got a more representative example of what the thing is going to look like in the end.
Okay, and I was thinking, I'm not on the Land Use Committee, but Deborah and I were chatting just a few moments ago, and my understanding, and will the Land Use Committee people correct me, please, where I'm off, my understanding is that this proposal has pretty much been accepted by the majority of the Land Use Committee to go forward. Am I wrong on that? Please correct me if I am.
You are correct. It was agreed to send it forth to the council.
Okay. Deborah?
I was just going to add, I know it has come through land use. I think that committee met at least twice on the issue, but then it also went to the Planning Commission, and they recommend approval. So it has come through a couple of different processes in its current state.
Councilor Costello?
I don't believe the Land Use Committee has seen the proposed changes the Attorney's Office is proposing.
No, we never did.
That is true, but it's no different than an amendment could have come forward at any time. And all I think, if I read what Gary is telling us, is he wants to delete the 2,000-foot rule is the only thing he's recommending.
I'm asking that the council consider taking out the language that was put in at the committee meeting. And then also we have had comments from council members, from the industry about minor wording changes which would make it work better. We don't get those until it gets out to the public as it has now, and that's not uncommon. When we do between a first and a second reading, we get comments, and there may be amendments, there may not. I'm thinking there'll be a couple.
Councilor Litz?
This is an informational, and that's what we're getting here, I think, is information. We've evolved with this on the Land Use Committee over a couple of meetings, and this is just another leg of that. It's funny about this because we all went out to Pier this year and pounded on the table and won it, and now it's here. And, I think it's like Gary said, we're just in the throes of the beginning of a very important public policy debate here, folks. It's a big deal. We need to take our time on it. We do need to get it right. I think that the public forum is the right place to do this. We've got to have other input besides just ourselves on this here. It's a funny deal. It's a subjective thing, like you said, kind of, but I can walk into a restaurant with my family and I can tell you whether we're going to eat there or not, if it feels like a bar or not. No, I'm not offering my services here to the city to judge places whether they're a bar or a restaurant, but I was thinking about Fort Collins, Colorado. I went there probably 30 years ago, and the city line and the city and the town ends at one place, and the county is just right across the street. And in the city, they're well regulated. The bars are just a few of them. And then as soon as you get to that county line, there are 2 blocks of solid party bars. And I remember going there thinking this was great, but what a mess. And I was thinking also that the city of Fort Collins, Colorado, which happens to be a college town, would probably change things had they known the way things were going to be. Now, I think that's a rather extreme example. We're probably not going to run up against that. But I think the city does have an interest in regulating how close and how many of these things we have around.
And I guess I find that it's kind of ironic, actually, because, we worked so hard to be able to get more alcohol licenses, or some of us for economic development, and yet, unfortunately, from just my standpoint, just as a person, not as not speaking for the city council as yet, then the governor, I'm still extremely disappointed that the governor feels as strongly as he does about allowing video gambling in as many places as possible, it seems. And of course, to me, that's just kind of ironic because it makes it, just puts us more in a box trying to work around all of that. I believe the legislature would have passed legislation this year to go ahead with more alcohol licenses and prohibit video lottery, but they very much knew without a doubt that the governor would veto the bill immediately. And so anyway, that's what we get, but anyway, we'll move on. I'm going to assume that we are going to continue with the first reading, and I, as a chairperson here, I am not trying to rush this. I'm just trying to move it forward like we have. Once a committee makes suggestions, we'll move it forward. We don't need to rush with the second reading, and we'll we welcome input individually and so forth. Are you comfortable with that, or what does the group want? Or is there we can't, it's hard in this business to please everyone all the time. I work hard at it. But Councilor Kavanaugh, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think, our discussion this afternoon can continue on this evening. First reading is a chance for the council to discuss, and I suspect we'll have the same discussion tonight. I welcome it.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Litz.
I was going to say, if somebody doesn't like the way the discussion's going at the first reading, they can always make a motion to defer.
Okay, we'll move on. And again, we are all respectful of each other's opinions, and I think you all know that. It's just hard to get unanimous feelings on every topic. Let's go ahead and run through our committee reports, please, and we'll start with the Audit Committee. Councilor Kavanaugh.
No report.
Fiscal Committee, Councilor Costello.
No report.
Land Use Committee, Councilor Jameson.
I think we just had it.
Okay, thank you. Public Services Committee, Councilor Brown.
You will have two pieces of legislation coming to you shortly. We had a meeting at 3 o'clock today regarding water issues. There will be one that will be upcoming, a resolution that was recommended by the committee for odd, even, year-round, and also restricting year-round noon to 5 watering. The benefit of this, according to the Water Department, is it helps manage the production of water in the city. Then there will also be an ordinance adding an $80 rebate program for timer control replacement. The benefit of that would be that it would help consumers, the customers, manage the sprinkling that we talked about regulating through that resolution. And then also we continue work on the child care issues, looking to possibly mirror the state ratios for its voluntary licensure, and then also safety inspections on facilities. And we're still checking on whether that's a possibility or not, and don't have a recommendation at this point.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. Now, open discussion, please. Any items today that you would like to share, any of you? Councilor Kavanaugh.
I was a bit surprised to read someplace, I can't remember where it was, that we have a problem with the windows at the pavilion, that apparently we're some $300,000 short. I'm curious as to, one, how that could have happened, and two, what the administration intends to do about it.
Okay. Mayor, would you like to address the councilor's question, please? I was very sorry to hear that, too, Councilor Kavanaugh.
Yeah, my understanding is, and I don't know if it came from the pavilion or it came from the company that is going to install the windows, but my understanding is that they didn't have the labor in one of them, and so what they're looking at doing now, they can do 2/3 of them now, and then they'll have to decide what they want to do the other third. So I don't know what side they're going to do, but I don't know where the mix-up really came from, but it came from somebody. That is not a real good news story for me either.
I was very disappointed to see that.
Real disappointed.
Councilor Litz?
Well, whenever I do a window bid, there's other things. There's fasteners, there's sealant, there's window stop, there's insulation that goes in there, there's trim on the inside. Has these things been considered as well?
Well, I hope they have. My understanding was that they didn't take labor. We can dig deeper and get you the report, but that's what they said. I don't know about that part. That's all I was told.
Councilor Stagers. Excuse me, Mayor. Councilor Stagers?
Yeah, I guess a concern I have about this $300,000 overrun is that, first of all, we're not getting anybody accountable for this. And then the information that was presented before the City Council was $600,000. And that might have influenced some people to vote for it, but that might not have voted for it if it was $900,000. So I think that we should be finding out, what happened here. I mean, this is a tremendous disparity.
We'll find out and get back. But that's what I've been told is that the labor wasn't, but I'll find out.
Yeah, the labor wasn't put on, but I mean...
I hear you. I'm not happy about either, so we'll get back to you.
Because once again, it could have influenced how some people voted on the council for this, and we got wrong information.
But by the way, Councilor Stagers, would you support me about $300,000 more to finish those windows?
Well, I think $300,000 would be good for snow gates.
Okay. Okay. Any other open discussion items? I have just a few, but I'd like you to share yours first. Okay, very quickly, I'd just like to ask for some support. I had an email today from Russ Sorensen wondering if we could move up items 43 and 44 tonight at the beginning of the calendar to accommodate students who are going to be here with their teachers regarding the mosaic wall. And I believe that Councilor Brown is going to second my motion to move that up. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's not for staff convenience or anything. That is for students coming. So I'd appreciate your support on that. Secondly, I'd like to just tell you that the Sports Authority had a regular quarterly meeting recently, and we are all supposed to start telling the world that we are looking very seriously for people to volunteer for the Summit League tournament, which will be held March 7th through 10th. There are many different ways that a person can volunteer, and soon, early June or sometime in there in June, we're going to schedule the new executive director, Mike Sullivan, of the Sports Authority to come and just visit with us for a few minutes about at an informational, I should say. Sorry, I'm going too fast. And that website, again, if a person, you as counselors and citizens listening in want to check that website out, it's www.siouxfallssportsauthority.com, and right there you can go ahead and email the executive director and tell him where you'd like to help, because we are going to need many, many, many volunteers to make that successful. And then one other item is just a heads up. Next week at the informational, just for probably 5 to 8 minutes, we are going to just have a little bit of a promotional information on the May 3rd Hispanic event, the Cinco de Mayo parade and event at Falls Park. And so Sister Janet is going to come, and there's going to also be a fairly new person in our city, a Mexican singer, very talented musician, I understand. And they're going to just talk to us a little bit about what all is going to be involved in the Cinco de Mayo celebration, including at the zoo, because the zoo is going to have mariachi music and all sorts of Hispanic treats that day, too. And that's kind of the list of my odds and ends. Would any of you have anything else before we adjourn our informational? Or I'm sorry, adjourn our informational and go into executive session? Okay, seeing that, I'll consider the informational adjourned. And may I have a motion to go into executive session, please?
So moved, Litz.
Councilor Litz, may I have a second? Good. You help me.
I believe it's contract negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Contract discussions.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for helping me on that. May I have a second to the motion?
Second, what? Contract negotiations on what?
I don't think we usually say.
Okay. Second.
Okay, a second. Okay, I have a motion and a second to go into executive session on a contract negotiation matter or two. Is there anyone opposed to